Shabbat shalom, everybody. I understand it's been a little quiet over in Zoom land, so I'm not yelling at you guys. I'm just trying to be loud enough for everybody to hear me. So I thought today we would look at our Parashat for the week. So our Parashat for the week is Korah, and if you've been reading through the book of Numbers, you will know that by now things are not going super great in the story. So the journey to the promised land, which started with such excitement and hope and promise, has fallen into catastrophe. So throughout the whole book of Leviticus, the children of Israel have encamped at the foot of Mount Sinai, learning how to relate to God and to live with him in their presence, and everything had been going relatively smoothly. But as soon as they packed up and actually started heading for the land of Canaan, problems began to arise. So the first thing that the book of Deuteronomy tells us that it's only an 11-day journey from Sinai to Canaan. So listen, walking is hard. I get it. Nobody likes walking. But seriously, 11 days. In the grand scheme of things, that's not such a long time. If you can just suck it up and tough it out for like a week and a half, you'll be home. But only a few days into the trip, and the Israelites are not only complaining about the food, but doing it so vehemently that they're wishing they were still back in Egypt. The people are railing against Moses, and the tensions are so high that even his siblings start turning on. And then we know what happens next. They go and they send men to go spy out the land, and most of them bring back a bad report. See, it's not a bad thing in itself to have a realistic view of the challenges ahead. But if there's one thing I can tell you from my experiences leading backpacking trips to the mountains, it's that if the leader says it's difficult, the followers will say it's impossible. And if the leader says it's impossible, the followers will lose all hope. So when the spies tell Israel that they don't stand a chance against the strength of the Canaanites, the predictable happens, and unchecked pessimism spreads throughout the camp until it becomes a full-scale revolt against not only Moses, but also God. And once again, the call goes out to abandon God and return back to Egypt to accept a life of slavery. And at this point, God has had enough. He realizes that while they may have been physically freed, this generation would always be slaves in Egypt in their hearts. He can't bring them into the land if their faith in his ability to keep his promises is so weak. So God decides that this generation will not see the promised land. Instead, they will wander in the desert for 40 years until all the slaves die out. And only then will God lead a new generation, a generation that had been born free and had known and trusted God their whole lives, into the promised land. And that brings us into Parashat Korah. I don't usually do a previously in the book of Numbers thing like that, but I think it's important to recognize that Korah didn't just come out of nowhere. It's easy for us to sit here and read about the Israelites and judge them for being so foolish and faithless, but imagine what it must have been like to be an average person in the camp. Maybe someone who lived kind of far from the center of the camp where all the action took place. So remember, this is a camp of anywhere between 600,000 and 2 million people, depending on who you ask. News moves slowly and unreliably in an environment like that. So say you were just some average Zebulonite. What was your experience like so far? Well, I imagine that ever since Moses showed up, your life has been a pendulum swinging between extreme boredom and terrifying danger. So on the good day, you're just baking half to death in the hot desert sun doing nothing. The Levites in the middle near the Mishkan get to see all the cool miracles you keep hearing about and do all the important, meaningful stuff. But don't worry, there's plenty of manna to be ground up and baked into cakes at least. Or who knows, maybe today will be an interesting day. Maybe we'll run out of water again. Or maybe one of your friends will get stoned to death for breaking some new law you hadn't heard about yet. Maybe we'll be attacked by Amalekites, or we'll get struck by a plague for complaining it's too hot or something. I mean, apparently Moses has been reading the law at the center of the camp, but it takes like 3 weeks for news to get back here. I'm just hearing about the golden calf thing now. The one silver lining is that at least in a few days we'll be in the promised land, and all this heat and thirst and hunger and hardship and uncertainty will be behind us. We can finally start living our new lives. Oh wait, what's that? Oh, apparently news has just arrived that we will not be going into the land. Oh, that's just fantastic. This whole miserable trip that was predicated on the promise that we'd have a land of our own at the end of it has apparently been all for nothing. And the only thing I have to look forward to for the rest of my life is sunburn, scorpions, sand in my underpants, and manna for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for the next 40 years. Unless we get rid of Moses. Well, Enter Korah. There was never a time so ripe for a power grab. So a little more background here. Korah was a leader amongst the Kohathites. The Kohathites were a division of the tribe of Levi, Moses' own family tribe. Rabbinical sources state that Korah was actually a cousin of Moses and Aaron. So think about what Korah's life has been like. He started out as a slave in Egypt and then became a free man. But he was still of the same status as every other Israelite. When the priestly class was established, it was the firstborn sons of every tribe that were to become priests. All the tribes of Israel were on equal footing. But then the sin of the golden calf occurred. And in the aftermath of that terrible ordeal, the tribe of Levi, Moses' own family, were the ones who declared loyalty to God and rose in prominence to become the new priestly class. So once again, Korah saw his position improving, but he still wasn't satisfied because Korah was a Kohathite. He was part of the tribe of Levi and was encamped close to the Mishkan, but his branch of the family didn't serve as priests. So the way he saw it, an accident of birth was all that was preventing him from being part of the most elite class. So every day he would watch the priestly class going about their duties in the Mishkan and jealously covet their position, especially the status enjoyed by his cousin Aaron, the high priest. So as the situation in the camp became more and more tense, Korah saw an opportunity to take power and the position he so desired. But he was smart enough not to try to take it by himself. So Korah cleverly gathered together other groups of people who felt similarly disenfranchised and jealous of the position held by the Levitical priests. So Korah was encamped right next to the tribe of Reuben, and he gathered together the three leaders from that tribe. The Reubenites believed that because of their progenitor had been the firstborn son of Jacob, that their tribe should enjoy prominence among all the tribes of Israel. So these men wanted the Reubenites to replace the Levites as the priestly class of the nation, and they were willing to back Korah's claim to the high priesthood in order to get it. But Korah didn't stop there either. He also created a coalition of 250 princes from all the different tribes. So these men were the firstborn sons of the most prominent families of Israel, the very same men who lost a chance to become the priests of the nation during the sin of the golden calf. The same men who had lost their position to the Levites and now wanted it back. So Korah gathers all these power-hungry men together and promises to grant them their desires if they help him become the new leader of the nation. Korah is willing to cut ties with his own tribe and betray his own family in order to gain the power he desires. So together, they confront Moses, and in front of the whole assembly, he accuses Moses. "You have gone too far," he tells them. "You have taken too much. You have gathered all of this power to yourself, and you refuse to share it. Look at all of these people. Are they not also the children of Israel? Are they not also holy? Isn't God with them as well? What right do you have to exalt yourself above them, to act as though you are better than them, to say that God only works through you?" The implication in Korah's accusation is clear. Moses and Aaron have failed the people, and they should step down from their positions of leadership in order to keep the peace. So the question I want to ask you guys today is, should they have? Shouldn't the children of Israel have the right to choose their own leaders, to choose its destiny? Isn't that what freedom is all about? And why wouldn't Moses give up his position if that's what the people want? We know by now that Moses is a very humble man, not the type to hold on to power for the sake of his own ego. Just a few chapters ago, God took some of the Holy Spirit that was on Moses and placed it on the heads of 70 elders of the tribes, spreading some of Moses' authority among them. Was Moses upset about this? Not at all. In fact, he was quite the opposite. When Moses' young assistant Joshua became upset about this, Moses responded by saying, "Are you jealous on my behalf? If only Adonai will make all the people prophets. If only Adonai will put the Spirit on all of them." Why does Moses react so differently this time? Isn't Korah asking for the same thing? For Moses to share some of his authority? What's wrong with that? Well, the answer is there's nothing wrong with that. Every great leader desires to share his influence. Moses certainly did. Towards the end of his life, before the children of Israel were about to go into the land, a journey that Moses would not be able to take with them, God instructs Moses to transfer his leadership to his disciple Joshua. God instructs Moses to lay his hands on Joshua and impart his spirit onto him. And the sages in the commentary on this verse, say that the act of laying hands is like lighting one candle to another. So imagine Moses is that candle. He is the one who's been bringing the light of his influence to the nation of Israel all this time. When he lays his hands on Joshua and lights another flame, will his own candle go out? No, not at all. The light of his influence will be doubled. Joshua will carry Moses' influence into the land and spread it even further. So when God placed the Holy Spirit on the 70 elders, Moses was not upset because he knew that his influence had been increased, not diminished. God was sharing his light among the people, not taking it away. So why then is this situation with Korah different? See, Moses realized that Korah can't tell the difference between influence and power. See, many people don't realize that there's a difference. After all, people who have power are often influential, and influential people usually have some power. But the Torah teaches that these two things are so different that they are allocated to two separate roles, kings and prophets. Power is the domain of the king. A king can levy taxes and conscript armies and wage war and punish crime. But prophets have no power at all. They can't tax anyone or raise any armies. They may speak the word of God, but they have no way to enforce it. All a prophet has is influence. All right, let's do a little test here. Who can name, say, 5 prophets off the top of their heads? So I'm not a big Bible memorizer, but even I can name a whole bunch of prophets. We got Moses, Elijah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Jonah. The list goes on and on. But meanwhile, I lost track of the kings of Israel after David and Solomon. Elijah's fight against corruption, Isaiah's visions of the world to come, John's voice crying in the wilderness, proclaiming the coming of the Messiah. These are stories that still move us today by the sheer force of their inspiration. These men have lit countless flames over the centuries, and thousands of years after their deaths, their light burns brighter than ever. The same can't be said for the likes of, Jehoshaphat or Jehu. If Kings David and Solomon are remembered today, it's because of their psalms and their wisdom, not the laws they passed or the wars they fought. Power forces people to behave in a certain way. Influence teaches them to see the world differently so that they change of their own accord. The use of power diminishes others. The spread of influence enlarges them. Korah isn't looking for influence. If that's what he wanted, Moses would gladly share it with him. Korah wants power. So the sages teach us that if influence is like a flame being passed from one candle to another, power is like water being poured from one bowl to another. When one candle lights another, the light is doubled. When water is poured from one bowl into another, it just gets divided in half. Influence can be shared, but power cannot without threat to authority. If there are competing sources of power within a single body, there can be no leadership. Moses must either put down the rebellion or fatally compromise the office with which he's been charged. So we just answered one part of the question. Moses knows he can't share his power, but if the people want a new leader, why shouldn't Moses just step down altogether and allow Korah a chance to maybe do things better? Well, putting aside the fact that God has commissioned Moses in this task, and he has no authority to renounce the honor given to him, even if that wasn't the case, Moses knows that Korah is not a suitable leader for the people of God. See, Moses can see right through Korah's rhetoric. Korah presents himself as a man of the people. All the community is holy. We're all equal. And yet it would seem that Korah thinks that some people are more equal than others. For someone running on a platform of equal distribution of power, he sure does seem to be looking to get the biggest equal portion for himself. See, Korah isn't a Democrat. He is a demagogue, using the fears and uncertainties of the populace to fuel and further his ambitions. And moreover, Moses can see that the coalition that Korah has put together cannot possibly stand. There are 2 separate groups within the Korah's faction, the Reubenites and the firstborn sons. Both groups are after the same thing, the priesthood. And Korah has promised it to both of them. Korah is playing both sides of the fence, and he won't hesitate to discard his allies once they serve their purpose. But worst of all, Korah doesn't understand what it means to be a leader in God's kingdom. So Korah is clever when he makes his argument against Moses and Aaron. He does something I call 2 truths and a lie. He makes a few undeniably true statements and then mixes a lie into the truth to give it credence. So when Korah says that all the people are holy, that's true. God has asked his people to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And when he says that God is with all of them, that's true too. That was the point of building the Mishkan, to give God a place to dwell among the people and to be with them wherever they went. Where Korah was wrong was in his third statement. Why then do you set yourself above God's people? You know, there's a theory in psychology that most people have heard of called projection. It's when people defend themselves against their own worst qualities by denying that they exist while attributing them to others. This seems to be exactly what's happening here with Korah. Korah is an ambitious man, so of course he reasons that Moses and Aaron must have the same drives and motivations that he does, the desire to be above the people. With this one word, Korah reveals himself to be unworthy of being a leader in God's kingdom. Moses is wise enough to know that while he is the leader of the nation, he is not above the people. Moses represents the birth of a new kind of leadership. You know, the children of Israel just left Egypt. When you think of ancient Egypt, what's the first thing that comes to mind? That'd be the pyramids, right? These buildings and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia were the great symbols of the ancient world. They were more than just buildings, though. They were statements made in brick and stone about how the world works. See, pyramids are wide at the base and narrow at the top. At the top of the pyramid was the king or the pharaoh. Beneath him, a series of elites. And at the bottom, the common people, all working to hold up the rulers at the top. This wasn't just one way of organizing society. It was the only way. And it repeated itself all over nature. The sun ruled over the stars. The lion ruled over the animals. Kings ruled over the nations. The whole universe was organized this way. But God had made Israel to be different. Israel was to represent to the world a new way of living with each other. A world where all human beings, not just the king, are made in the image and likeness of God. Now, there's still a need for leaders in this world. An orchestra is just a bunch of noise without a conductor. An army is just a mob without a general. And the nation would collapse into anarchy without some form of government. But no one is entitled to rule over others without their assent. In a world where all people have equal dignity in the eyes of heaven, and the leader does not stand above the people don't serve him. He serves the people, and he serves God. If the symbol of the world was the pyramid, the symbol of the Jewish people is the menorah, an inverted pyramid, wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. A leader in God's kingdom does not lift himself on the backs of those beneath him. Instead, he lifts others up on his shoulders. But Korah doesn't understand this. And for this and many other reasons, God judges against him and affirms his choice of leader in Moses. Only a man of great humility can be the leader as the bottom of the pyramid, honoring others rather than seeking honor, inspiring others to reach new heights rather than climbing ahead on their own. A great leader is motivated by ideals, not personal ambition. They are driven by desire to influence, not a desire for power. To be a great leader is to be a great servant first. And those who serve do not lift themselves high. They are the ones who lift others towards God. Shabbat shalom, everyone.